Hey, good evening, my friends and fellow hackers. My name is Braindead. I train every day, one try hack me room, one new skill, always ethical, and by 30, I'll be a professional hacker. Today is day 67, and not too sure what room I'm gonna do, but I gotta do a room quick because it is 11:37 p.m. and my streak's about to break. I'm gonna do a shout out real quick though. All right, I think I found a room. The room, I'm sorry, not the room. I found a comment. I have a comment from wrenchh.h. He said, "Hey man, I watched every episode so far. Really enjoyable content. Keep it up, dude." With a smiley face. Yo, shout out to that guy. He's awesome. And if any of you are like him and have watched my videos, thank you so much. I wish you guys the best of luck on your journey, and I'm happy to be able to do these cybersecurity challenges with you guys. And I'm happy to just be alongside your journey. So let's find a room, and maybe I could change my lighting a bit. I'm looking real bright right now. Okay, so this is a room I really wanted to go over. It's file inclusion or path traversal. So LFI, and I feel like LFI is kind of a lower level exploitation technique, and I've done it quite a bit in these CTF challenges. So I want to go over what LFI is, file inclusion, and path traversal. So focusing on a room on Try Hack Me is the best way I could do that. Now, hopefully this is, oh, thank goodness, dude. I needed to get the streak for today. I was about to, I have streak freezes, but I don't want to use them. So we got that, and let's go over the introduction here, which is, I'm guessing just a brief overview of file inclusion and path traversal. So the introduction states, file inclusion and path traversal are vulnerabilities that arise when an application allows external input to change the path for accessing files. For example, imagine a library where the catalog system is manipulated to access restricted books not meant for public viewing. Similarly, in web applications, the vulnerabilities primarily arise from improper handling of file paths and URLs. These vulnerabilities allow attackers to include files not intended to be part of the web application, leading to unauthorized access or execution of code. And typically, whenever I find an LFI vulnerability, I'm looking for logs. And if I have access to logs, we can start log poisoning, which eventually leads to remote code execution, which then results in a reverse shell. And then once I get a reverse shell, of course, then we start privilege escalating and trying to find an account and etc. At least in these CTFs. Real world, I'm not too sure as of yet, but in these many CTF challenges I've gone through, that is typically the path. So the objectives for this room is understand what file inclusion and path traversal attacks are and their impact, identify file inclusion and path traversal vulnerabilities in web applications, exploit these vulnerabilities in a controlled environment, understand and apply measures to mitigate and prevent these vulnerabilities. And there's some prerequisites. We're just going to get into it. So if you guys want to see an example of path traversal and a way that I used it, you can actually look at my previous video, which was called backtrack. I think day 67. What is day? Is this day 68? Yeah, look at my day 67, or it might be day 66 video, overviewing backtrack, and I believe the very first example of my exploitation is using LFI to find Tomcat's config.xml file, which had the username and password. So let's get started here. I'm going to connect to my VPN so I can access Try Hack Me's virtual machine. I don't think, let's go down. I gotta move this. Excellent. Okay. Hopefully that's big enough for you guys. Alright, so let's review task 2. It says structure of a web application. Web applications are complex systems comprising several components working together to deliver a seamless user experience. At its core, a web application has two main parts: the front end and the back end. Front end, this is the user interface of the application, typically built using frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue.javascript. It communicates with the back end via APIs. Backend, this server-side component processes user requests, interacts with databases, and serves data to the front end. It's often developed using languages like PHP, Python, and JavaScript, and frameworks like Node.js, Django, or Laravel. One of the fundamental aspects of web application is the client-server model. In this model, the client, usually a web browser, sends a request to the server hosting the web application. The backend server then processes this request and sends back a response. The client and server communication usually happens over the HTTP/HTTPS protocols. And this is kind of overviewing how the front end communicates with the back end. So the user could either do a request that sends it to the front end, or response. I guess that's the reply. The front end sends the request to the back end. It goes to file operations, file system, and from the back end, it sends back the response to the front end, and the front end responds back to the user. The database does data querying sends it to the back end. It does the interactions with the file system, and it reports back. Configuration files talks to the back end. External APIs talks to the back end. Which makes sense, and that's orderly, and that keeps things working smoothly. Server-side scripting and file handling. Server-side scripts run on the server and generate the content of the front end, which is then sent to the client. Unlike client-side scripts like JavaScript in the browser, server-side scripts can access the server file systems and databases. File handling is a significant part of a server-side scripting. Web applications often need to read from or write to files on the server. For example, reading configuration files, saving user uploads, or including code from other files. For example, the application below includes a file based on user input. Let's take a look at this website. So let me just go to this website just to see. I think this might be okay. That is the examples. This is great. I wanted that. Alright, so for example, the application below includes a file based on user input. Okay. If this input is not correctly validated and sanitized, the attacker might exploit the vulnerable parameter to include malicious files or access sensitive files on the server. In this case, the attacker could view the contents of the server's password file, so etc password. And yeah, it'll literally just, so it was that local file inclusion, and I could yes. And as you could see, we have yes at the top in the website bar. Is there any way to make this website bar bigger? Let me see if I can make that bigger. Okay, let's see. I just installed the plugin. Hopefully that allows me to zoom in and see if that works. If not, I'll just edit it afterwards. So either way, we are trying to do a local file injection with this parameter at the top right here. And it says currently LFI.php page equals yes. And I could type in etc password after here in theory, and this should allow me to, but I'm not allowed to go outside the var/www/html directory. So is the objective to get around that? So, okay. So we're not allowed to do it immediately. File inclusion and path traversal vulnerabilities arise when user inputs are not properly sanitized or validated. Since attackers can inject malicious payloads to log files, /var/log/apache2 access.log, and manipulate file paths to execute the log payload. An attacker can achieve remote code execution. An attacker may also read configuration files that contain sensitive information, like database credentials, if the application returns the file and plain text. Lastly, insufficient error handling may also reveal system paths or file structures, providing clues to attackers about potential targets for path traversal or file inclusion attacks. And like I said previously, if we have local file inclusion, the first thing I'm looking for are log files, because I can inject malicious payloads into log files and get it to perform remote code execution. So let's proceed. So let's talk about the basics of file inclusion. A traversal string, commonly seen as ... is used in path traversal attacks to navigate through the directory structure of a file system. It's essentially a way to move up one directory level. Traversal strings are used to access files outside the intended directory. Now I'm going to show you what this does, essentially just using terminal. So right now I am in my downloads folder, and of course before this folder we have, I guess this is my root folder, essentially my root folder, I think it's my home folder, but I'm gonna go back to my downloads and I'm gonna show you exactly a ... and in theory this should just take me one back, and it did. It just took me back to this folder. So if I was like nested in, let's see, I'm going to my try hack me folder, I'm going into, I don't know, London, and I'm going into this 10. Whatever directory. If I just do cd ... it'll take me back one directory into my London folder, and if I even go ... again, that would take me to my try hack me folder, because I'm going back 2 directories. And that's essentially what's happening when I perform this same injection into the website path. It's trying to take me back 2 directories. And typically, when you're on a website, you're in this directory, this var www/html directory. So when you see a lot of people do etc password, we do ... So we're going all the way back to the home directory, and it's not technically the home directory. Let me see if I can show you guys exactly what the directory is. It is, is it the home directory? It's one before the home directory. It's this directory right here on the right side. Now we're trying to get into Etsy, and then we're trying to get the password. So let's change it back. If we go to var, you can't see it because my big head's in the way, but www is right there. And we got HTML. So, in theory, this is what we're doing. If we do a cat, and we do a ... Etsy password, which is exactly what we typically do when we're trying to inject a website. I'm just going to quickly just make a different file in Etsy, just to make my life, I don't know, test. I need to do this on sudo. Right. So I should probably put some text into that, huh? Test for LFI. And I wonder if I can just do this. I need to do that sudo. But either way, right? We'll do a file instead of a cat, because it'll still call out to it. So we're gonna do a file, and we're gonna do a ... Etsy password, and as you can see, it worked out perfectly. It's identifying Etsy password as ASCII text. I should get rid of Etsy test, but I'll just do it real quick before I forget. I wonder if this is gonna work. Yup. Okay, great. Okay, so where were we before I just made the biggest mistake of my life? Um, okay. Basics of file inclusion. A traversal string, commonly seen as dot dot slash, is used in path traversal attacks to navigate through the directory structure of a file system. It's essentially a way to move up one directory level. Traversal strings are used to access files outside the intended directory. Relative pathing refers to locating files based on the current directory. For example, include folder file.php implies that file.php is located inside a folder named folder, right? Which is in the same directory as the executing script. Okay? Absolute pathing involves specifying the complete path starting from the root directory. For example, var whtml folder file php, the whole entire path. Remote file inclusion, or RFI, is a vulnerability that allows attackers to include remote files, often through input manipulation, and that's where I could host my own Python web server and get it to call back to my Python web server and execute whatever file I am hosting. So, for example, if a web application uses a URL and a get parameter like include.php, page equals http, my IP address, exploit.php, an attacker can replace the URL with a path to a malicious script. And we've definitely done that before. So, local file inclusion typically occurs when an attacker exploits vulnerable input fields to access or execute files on the server. For example, // password. While LFI primarily leads to unauthorized file access, it can escalate to RCE. This can occur if the attacker can upload or inject executable code into a file that is later included or executed by the server. Techniques such as log poisoning, which makes injecting code into log files and then including those log files, are examples of how LFI can lead to RCE. And I don't really know what this is. This diagram is kind of displaying. Okay, this diagram above differentiates the process of exploiting RFI and LFI vulnerabilities. In RFI, the focus is on including and executing a remote file, whereas in LFI, the attacker aims to access local files and potentially leverage this access to execute code on the server. What kind of pathing refers to locating files based on the current directory? So what kind of pathing? So there was two types of pathings we learned here, which was absolute pathing and relative pathing. And obviously relative pathing is the answer here. Am I wrong? Relative pathing refers to locating files based on the current directory. Okay, well, it's absolute pathing? What is happening? I feel like it has to be relative pathing. So far, this is not a smooth process so far. Okay, great. And what kind of pathing involves the file's complete path? And we obviously know it's absolute pathing. Great. So PHP wrappers, this is fun. This is where you get into a bit of conversion and filtering, which is like through base 64. We've definitely seen this. So PHP wrappers are part of PHP's functionality that allows users access to various data streams. Wrappers can also access or execute code through built-in PHP protocols, which may lead to significant security risks if not properly handled. For instance, an application vulnerable to LFI might include files based on a user's supplied input without sufficient validation. In such cases, attackers could use the PHP filter. This filter allows a user to perform basic modification operations on the data before it's read or written. For example, if an attacker wants to encode the contents of an included file, such as etc password in base64, this can be achieved by using the convert.base64-encode conversion filter of the wrapper. The final payload would then be PHP filter convert.base64-encode resource equals etc password, and what this does is it encodes the Etsy password contents into base64, and you simply just decode it. So it wants me to actually do it. So we're going to go over to their lovely lab. We're going to the playground. And, I don't know, let's just do something here. So, it wants us to do this PHP filter. And this should encode Etsy password into a nice little base64 string, which we just go and take to base64 decode. And we paste this string, and we get the contents of Etsy password. Now, I don't know if there's a flag in here. Is there? It doesn't look like there's a flag. Okay, so we are just doing it. Okay, and obviously it's just telling us this is decoded. There are many categories of filters in PHP. Some of these are strings. Let's just look at the categories here. All right, is there anything of valuable insight? We'll just read through this table. So it has base64, encode resource HT access, rot13, string to upper, string to lower, string.strip tags. Okay, so it's just removing the strip tags, and no filter. This is just the base. So the data stream wrapper is another example of a PHP's wrapper functionality. The data wrapper allows inline data embedding. It is used to embed small amounts of data directly into the application code. For example, oh, does this call out PHP info? Okay, that's cool. I've never actually used this before, so let's take a look. Now, I think it's just as simple as, oh, you just drop it. Yeah, and it shows you php.info. Cool. So, yeah, we just put this right after a page. That's cool. Let's see if I could make a little note of that. All right, and we got the question, what part of PHP's functionality allows users access to various data streams that could also access or execute code through built-in protocols? And I believe this is just PHP wrappers. Woo, all right. So we got 4 or 5 more tasks here, it looks like. Base directory breakout in web applications. Safeguards are put in place to prevent path traversal attacks. However, these defenses are not always foolproof. Below is the code of an application that insists that a file name provided by the user must begin with a predetermined base directory, and will also strip out file traversal strings to protect the application from file traversal attacks. So we have a function contains string, string, and substring. Return string position, string, substring, it's not equal false. Okay, so if get page, if it does not contain the string page and period slash period and contain string page for, so it needs to have this, and it cannot have this. Okay, include get page. So it just needs to have this, and it's trying to avoid path traversal using period slash period, which there's probably other ways you could do period slash. It just through URL encoding is what I would immediately assume is just to use URL encoding instead of period slash. So, and then it says you're not allowed to go outside var, and that's actually what we witnessed. So it is possible to comply with. Okay, so they found a different way. I was thinking URL encoding, but they just used period slash, which also works. So it's possible to comply with this requirement and navigate to other directories. This can be achieved by appending the necessary directory traversal sequences after the mandatory base folder, which they do very easily right here. And I'm just going to add that to my notes. All right, so the PHP function contains string, checks if a substring exists within the string. If the if condition checks 2 things. First, if get page does not contain the substring period slash period, and if get page contains the substring var www html. However, period, period, slash, slash, period, period, slash, slash bypasses this filter because it still effectively navigates up to directories similar to period, period, slash, period, period, slash. It does not exactly match the blocked pattern. And there's many different ways you could have changed this. So that worked. And obfuscation was the way I was thinking. Obfuscation techniques are often used to bypass basic security filters that our web applications might have in place. These filters typically look for obvious directory traversal sequences like period, period, slash. However, attackers could often evade detection by obfuscating these sequences and still navigate through the server's file system. And just like this, it's encoding. We could do standard URL encoding, which period, period, slash becomes this %2e, %2e, %2f. And if we double encode it, we get this nice little string right here, which is actually what we ended up doing in my previous episode, was double URL encoding for the period, period, slash, as the file was had a filter very similar to period, period, slash, where it's probably just had a very direct period, period, slash as its restriction. So, okay, great. So we know we can obfuscate period, period, slash as well to bypass some basic level security filters. So we got PHP session files could also be used in an LFI attack, leading to remote code execution, particularly if an attacker can manipulate the session data. In a typical web application, session data is stored in files on the server. If an attacker can inject malicious code into these session files, and if the application includes these files through an LFI vulnerability, this could lead to code execution. For example, the vulnerable application hosted in this website, and we got some code here that says if page session page equals get page echo you're currently in get page, include get page. So if we actually go to the website here, we tried to go period, period, slash, etc password, it's literally just echoing what I have here under page. What we could do is exploit this vulnerability by injecting PHP code, which is pretty nuts. So let's do that. So I'm just going to copy that as well. Okay. So this code is then saved in a session file on the server. Subsequently, the attacker can use the LFI vulnerability to include this session file. Since session IDs are hashed, the ID can be found in the cookie section of your browser. Oh, so then access the URL sessions.page !page equals varlib php session ID will execute the injected PHP code in the session file. Wow. I didn't know this one. So we allowed it to be able to execute code. Then we just access our session ID to wow. And it's just using the php.info. Great. So we got the big boy now. We got log poisoning. So log poisoning is a technique where an attacker injects executable code into a web server's log file and then uses an LFI vulnerability to include and execute this log's file. This method is particularly stealthy because log files are shared and are a seemingly harmless part of a web server operations. In a log poisoning attack, an attacker must first inject malicious PHP code into a log file. This could be done in various ways, such as crafting an evil user agent, sending a payload via URL using netcat, or refer a header that the server logs. Once the PHP code is in the log file, the attacker can exploit an LFI vulnerability to include it as a standard PHP file. This causes the server to execute the malicious code contained in the log file, leading to RCE. So, is this a log file? Okay, so he is connecting to the IP address on port 80 and then executing this command. We're getting a 400 bad request. But this code is still logged in the server access logs. So, if we go to Apache 2/access log, it's actually executing this because it was logged in here. So what technique does an attacker use to inject executable code into a web service log file and then use a file inclusion vulnerability? Now, this is kind of silly, but it was log poisoning. And we could do a quick example. So we have, yeah. Is this playground still? Is that what it wanted me to do? Was playground? I don't know if that was playground. Oh, to replicate the above demo, you may head to... So all we need to do is we're just going to go and see 10, 64, 152, 179 on 80. And let's execute that code. Now, although we'll get a bad request, this should still execute once we go into Apache access log. Because now that it's in the logs, right, and then... Okay, I think I gotta go to... Can you exploit the page parameter? I don't even see a page parameter, so I'm just gonna do a yes. There we go. I guess I could have just made the parameter too. No such file directory. Oh, you know what? I have it twice. There we go. But does it... there we go. It executed right here on this part of the logs. Let me see if I could pull up maybe my notes here of a time where I did log poisoning just to further define this. Alright, I don't have too good of notes for it, but I do have what the payload was. So I'll share with you guys what the payload was. So this one, we have a PHP echo, PHP info. But instead, what I did was I did a PHP. I'll type it out so you guys can see the payload. PHP system get cmd, and this allowed us to do some remote code execution. I think there might have been a bit of an extra step, but I don't exactly remember. If you guys are curious, I think this room was called include. So if you do want to see me do some log poisoning, I'd recommend watching my video include, which I actually do log poisoning. So we're going to wrap this up here with the last task. We have PHP wrappers. So PHP wrappers can be used not only for reading files, but also for code execution. The key here is the PHP filter stream wrapper, which enables files transformations on the fly. Take the PHP, this is exactly what I was talking about. Take the PHP base64 filter as an example. This method allows attackers to execute arbitrary code on the server using a base64 encoded payload. So we'll use the PHP code, PHP system, cmd, echo shell, done. The value of the payload when encoded to base64 will be this base64 string. Excuse me. And we have a filter. We have a filter convert base64 decode, which is decoding the base64 string, which is right here. And that just, it looks like it just executes it. When the server processes the request, it first decodes the base64 string and then executes the PHP code, allowing the attacker to run commands on the server via the cmd get parameter. Okay. It is important to not include the @cmd equals huma because it will be encoded when the form is submitted. What is the content of the hidden text file in the flags folder? So this at the top here, right? The @cmd equals who am I? That's actually what I ended up doing for the log poisoning, if I recall correctly, because that part of the log file contained get cmd. So whatever command I put in the website bar, it was actually showing up in the log file exactly where this showed up in the logs. So whatever I was putting in there would output this cmd, which eventually led me to remote execution. And I guess the easiest way to tell is through who am I. Okay, and what is the content of the hidden text file in the flags folder? Okay, so it wants me to actually do it. So let's do it. So I'm just thinking about it. Maybe the easiest way to do this might just be simply doing this. And this should give me a bad request. And now, if we just go to Apache logs, we don't even need to do this base 64. So if we just go to, what was, I don't know the Apache logs directory off the top of my head. I think it's var Apache 2, var log Apache 2 access log. So var log Apache 2 access.log. And at the bottom of this page, I gotta scroll through past PHP info. I'll have my CMD. Where is it? CMD. Oh. But do I see it here? Oh, there's a shell done. I'm gonna just try this and hope for the best. And hopefully I get a www data. Do I see it? Oh, I see it right there. www-data. Okay, great. So let's just do an ls. Now that we have local file inclusion, hell, I might even go all the way. I might just go all the way and just get remote shell real quick. First things first, let me set up my listener. And I put my reverse shell in. I don't know if this is going to work. I didn't think that was going to work. Let me try a different one. I'm just going to encode this real quick because there's just no way for me to put it in oh, whoops. I need to fix this up. 192, that's my IP. That's that. Let's encode this so I could actually put it into the website path. Let's do that. Did I get it? Nope, I didn't get it. We'll be back once I get it. I just gotta find the right payload. Okay, cool. I found the payload. So I'm just gonna show you guys what the payload was. It was this right here. This is a classic payload. I mean, just the RM, blah 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 blah, or NCing into me. And I simply just encoded it with the URL. Boom, copy pasted this right here into this. Now I have reverse shell. So we got, yeah. And we're just gonna cd into flags. And look at that. That looks like our flag. Now, I don't know if I have to cat this. I feel like that'd be weird. If anything, it looks like that's the flag. I'm gonna just assume that's the flag. Oh my god, it's asking for the contents. Okay, it's asking for the contents. I gotta type this whole thing. Psych. Unless I could do this. I always have a lot of trouble with the reverse shells. Beautiful. And boop. I kind of want to see, but, yep, so that is what we're doing here. I might try to get a root on this just for fun, but I won't bore you guys with that. So, file inclusion and patch reversal vulnerabilities arise from improper handling of user-supplied input in web applications. In file inclusion, attackers exploit the way web applications handle files, leading to local file inclusion or remote file inclusion. On the other hand, patch reversal involves navigating the server's directory structure to access files outside the intended directory. Okay, so mitigation and prevention strategies. Ensure all user inputs are properly validated and sanitized. Implement allow listing for file inclusions and access. Define which files can be included or accessed and reject any request that does not match these criteria. Configure server settings to disallow remote file inclusion and limit the ability of scripts to access the file system. Performing regular code reviews and security audits to identify potential vulnerabilities and ensure that everyone involved in the development process understands the importance of security. Thank you guys for watching this video. I was thinking about local file inclusion. Ooh! Is it December 1st? Dude, I think the challenge is open. Woo! too. So watch out for the next few videos. I'm gonna be releasing the videos to this challenge. I think it's like 30 days of Try Hack Me or something like that. And yeah. But thank you guys for watching. LFI is a super important part. And I hope you guys now kind of have an understanding of LFI. Thanks. Bye.